And so this is a negative stimulus, the cutback that's going to be occurring, and is going to dampen the economy. The third thing is the Federal Reserve has been engaged in extraordinary support to the financial system. The Federal Reserve went from being the lender of last resort to effectively the lender of first resort. It's done things that no central bank was ever supposed to do. It's not clear that they should have done it, but anyway, they've done it. So for instance, almost all the mortgages in the United States were being bought by the Federal Reserve. The private market in mortgages totally dried up. And the Federal Reserve bought more than $1 trillion of mortgages. And traditionally, central banks buy T-bills, safe government paper, but they've been buying risky mortgages. Well, they're ending that program, and that means that there is a very serious risk going forward of an increase in interest rates, long-term interest rates. The fourth problem is that there is a continuing problem in residential foreclosures. This is what began the crisis. People, the subprime mortgage, you may remember the people losing their homes. The problems have continued. And in many ways, we now have not only an economic problem, but a social problem. In 2008, 2 million Americans lost their homes. In 2009, more than 2 million Americans lost their home. In 2010, we expect 2.5 to 3.5 million Americans to lose their homes. So this is a very major social problem that we have. And we have, the market in some ways is not working the way it should be, because we have these millions of Americans who are losing their homes, and at the same time we have vacant homes, we have homeless people. Demand and supply are not being matched in the way they should. The programs that the administration introduced a year ago have not worked. They made things a little bit better, but not much better. In particular, the administration hasn't dealt with the fact that 1 out of 4 mortgages are underwater. That means 1 out of 4 mortgages, the value of what people owe is greater than the value of the house. The equity that they have in their home is negative. And for most Americans, the home is their major source of savings. And now they have no savings. The shortfall, the gap between the value of the mortgage and the value of the home is estimated to be somewhere between $700 and $900 billion. So this is one way of seeing the kind of threat that is facing our residential market. And as long as this problem continues, it's unlikely that the economy can return to normal. But in addition to the residential real estate, we have a massive problem in commercial real estate that's just beginning to come to the top. Commercial real estate is underwater as well. The fall in the prices of commercial real estate has even been greater, about 40% as opposed to about 30% in residential real estate. There are about $300 to $500 billion of commercial mortgages that have to be rolled over each year during the next 3 to 5 years, and it will be very difficult to do that. The contracts under which these were underwritten are so complicated that there is a huge litigation risk. The first of these problems, just to give you a flavor, came out in the beginning of this year, where in New York City there is one development called Stuyvesant went bankrupt, and it was a multi-billion-dollar, one project, it was a multi-billion-dollar bankruptcy. Of course, with so many residential mortgages and so many commercial mortgages going into default, the banks are having a problem. And unfortunately, the Obama and Bush administrations focused their attention on saving the big banks and forgot about the small banks. The result is that last year, 140 American banks went bankrupt. This year, we expect more banks to go bankrupt. And this is the tip of the iceberg, because if banks are going bankrupt, there are a lot more banks that are in very bad shape. One of the problems when they're in bad shape is they stop lending, and that causes problems for small and medium-sized businesses especially that have to go to the banks to get capital. And so that brings me to the sixth problem, that these enterprises can't get access to credit. Banks are being constrained both by their supervisors and the balance sheet, and by the fact that much of the lending is collateral-based lending, and the collateral, which is real estate, has gone down in value. So one way of seeing the magnitude of this is, I don't know if you can see the chart, but all you have to see is the fact that the line there drops off. That's the supply of loans, which has gone, the credit has declined dramatically in the United States. There is a similar decrease in Europe. And obviously, with that kind of decline, there's going to be contraction in business. The final problem is the weakening of the euro in Europe makes America's export prospects bleak. The President, in his State of the Union address, talked about how we have to export our way out of the crisis, in effect. But of course, it's not possible for all countries to export their way out. Trade with Mars remains limited. And so we can't all simultaneously engage in export-led recovery. It was true in the 97-98 crisis that Korea, Thailand, Indonesia could export their way to recover. But these were small relative to the global economy. But Europe and the United States both can't export. But the United States was hoping that we would be able to export to Europe. We were hoping for a strong Europe and a weak dollar. And I don't know if we deliberately had a strategy of a weak dollar, but it was working well for our exporters that the dollar was so weak. But now there's been what I call a negative beauty contest, where Europe and the United States have been competing on who is uglier. And for a long while, the United States was winning the race very clearly, and that led to the weak dollar. But Europe more recently has been doing better in this race. And with the problems in Greece, the euro has gotten much weaker, and that means makes it much more difficult for the U.S. to export. And the strong dollar combined with a weak Europe means that the prospects of the United States exporting its way out of the crisis look much bleaker.